Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, and this is Paul and Diane. As we,
Mr. Howell. You know Mr. Howell
who's Mr. Howell?
from Gilligan's Island. You never watched Gilligan's Island?
I never watched
I did.
Gilligan's
Oh,
Island.
you
I
did.
did, yeah,
You did?
yeah,
sorry.
Mr. Howell,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Howell.
Yeah.
Yeah, love you.
No,
Anyway.
I did not know, but
Okay.
so I was telling Diane right before this episode that you'll never guess this, but at the true story, at the very end of the last Christmas Mass, I took a look. We have a little prayer booklet where people write their prayer intentions, at the back of church, and the last prayer written on Christmas Day was, "Lord, please let me win the Mega Millions."
Because it's like $1 billion right now.
Is it really
At the time
that
of
much?
recording?
Is it
yeah,
that much?
yeah.
Wow. So that's
Close
awesome.
to it, yeah.
But I was kind of like, we pray all the time for all the intentions in our prayer book. And I'm like, I want to exclude that one from my prayer. Lord, everyone except for that one. I don't know who wrote it, but don't let them be rich. So we live in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which has some of the wealthiest zip codes in the United States of America.
Correct.
We got New Canaan, we got Darien, we got Greenwich, which is where Diane is from. Greenwich.
Yes.
I live in Stamford, Connecticut, which is also known as Stam Vegas, which is also known as Stamganistan. Depending on
Okay,
who
I've
you
never
ask.
heard any of those.
Anyway, go on.
No, Stanford has 5 zip codes, some of which...
Wait, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.
No.
We have a lot.
I think it's only 5.
06901, 06902, 3, 4, 5, 6,
6.
7. Maybe there's no 7 and 8. It's
It
at
definitely
least
goes
6.
up to 6.
It's
Is
at
it
least
6,
Yes.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know
Okay,
about
so maybe
7.
at least 6. I was only familiar with 5. But some of them, like 06905 in North Stamford, is extraordinarily rich. And 06903
Depending on where you
downtown.
are, I live in 06905, and I'm at the lower end of my house, for
Okay,
example. My property is at the lower end of that
You're
zip
on the
code.
border.
You're in the
Right.
slum area of that part.
06905, yeah. Right.
But, what do you consider rich? I mean, it seems like keeping up with the Joneses, you've got to make... We were talking earlier about how, to live in a decent home around here, you got to make $200,000 a year.
At a minimum, yeah.
At a minimum, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, is it okay, morally okay? Should a Christian be concerned about increasing their income, living in these wealthy McMansions that you find in Darien and Greenwich? I mean,
Well, you're not gonna. First of all, if you're making like $200,000 a
You're not
year,
living
you're
in
gonna be
Greenwich.
struggling to pay your rent here in Stamford and
I know,
Greenwich.
right? Which is the
So
sad,
Stanford-
crazy
you're not
part.
living
Yeah.
in a McMansion. So I think we have to. Everything is relative, right? Like in Greenwich, for example, a 3-bedroom condo is gonna cost you $1.2 million. Okay,
That's
and so,
outrageous.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
but
a 3-bedroom
and that's
condo.
And it
that-
needs- and it
probably-
needs a full
work.
renovation.
It needs work, and so I mean, really, a 3-bedroom, really small house is gonna cost you upwards of $2 million. So rich is relative. You're not just because you make $250,000 a year does not mean that you're by any means living the lifestyles of the rich and famous. Now, of course, you can be maxing out your credit cards. You can be spending for I think honestly, people just our generation in particular, it's unbelievable to me the amount people have loans and debt and whatever, and it's we've built this culture of just entertainment and pleasure such that it's just you just on the weekend people don't think about their finances. It's I'm gonna go out and go to dinner and spend $150, $200, but
Easily.
meanwhile
Yeah,
I'm
easily.
in debt. Meanwhile, I've got all these bills to pay. It's people are definitely living above their means. So whether or not you have the money may not be as I don't know, pertinent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think it is relative. I think that, I think we always have to put things in context of the United States. This podcast goes all over the world, right? And so some of the poorest people, and I'm not talking about the destitute, which we do have a lot of in the United States, and it's terrible. But you're it's terrible. But your average poor person in the United States that has that's not homeless, has a job, but is living at or below the poverty line, probably has a way higher standard of living than somebody who's at the poverty line in a developing country.
Oh, absolutely. I'll never forget. I did a mission trip out to North Dakota to a Native American reservation, Turtle Mountain, about 12 miles from the Canadian border. It was a really wonderful experience. But it struck me as we're driving around, these were shacks and shanties, but every single one had a satellite dish.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So I'm it's
Priorities,
poor, but
yeah.
it's heated, it's running water, which is better than most of the world. So
Yeah. So and then you take Fairfield. Fairfield County is a different universe, right? Compared to like if you look at the world, there's a few of them in the United States, like Palm Beach
Beverly
and
Hills.
Beverly Hills.
You know,
Like
yeah.
there's these wealthier areas, and generally like most bigger cities have wealthy areas. Like Chicago's got them, and so it's not like it's completely unique. I think one of the things I've always thought of, because like I've done well financially, I have a good job, and like I've been rewarded for that over time with compensation, and so I can afford to have like even though I'm at the bottom quartile of 06905, like it's like it's like I have a decent property, and you've been to my house, and you blessed
it's
it.
very nice. I did bless your house.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
It was mediocre. No, I'm just kidding.
compared to the rest of the houses in that zip code, yeah, I mean it's not like the greatest thing in the world, but it works. But like as I've gotten deeper in my career, like if you're a really good woodworker or you're a blacksmith, like if you think about like the old trades, like I've gotten good at what I do too, and like that's where I'm trained. And it happens to be that my field is like very associated with the New York metropolitan area because it's financial capital of the world, and I work in finance.
Yeah,
and so I'm like very tied to New York, and that's why I have to live here. Like all else equal, like I probably wouldn't choose to live in like one of the most expensive areas of the country. Like that's not like something you really shoot for.
Right.
Well, some people do actually, might be, because you want to be surrounded by people like that. But I'm not like that. It just happens to be where I am and what I've trained in and what I'm doing.
And you're from Connecticut, so
I'm from Connecticut. I'm not from around here though. I'm from Archdiocese of Hartford.
Yeah, which Meriden, right?
No, Cheshire.
Cheshire's very kind of a wealthy
it's nice,
area, right?
Yeah, but nothing like
Fairfield County.
Yeah, it's not like Fairfield County. It's
so,
not like Fairfield County.
So could a Christian aspire to be rich? I mean, depending what rich is consistent, right? I mean,
well, how do you define rich? You're like Jordan Peterson. Well, what do you mean by that?
I guess here's what I mean by that. I mean, can a Christian desire to continually increase your income even above what you need?
Just to hold it on for yourself and to buy things like to spend it on yourself? But what are you doing with it?
But here's the thing, right? So if you tithe, you give 10%, that means you still have 90% for yourself, right? So, I mean, if I've got a nice house, good family, nice neighborhood, well, let's make an extra 100,000 this year, and I'll give 10,000 to charity. But that means 90,000 is going to my car and my vacation and this,
Well, it also might be going to college tuition
or college tuition, right?
Catholic school tuition, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So, but I think there's a difference between wants and needs, right? So obviously we got to fulfill our needs, college tuition being a need, things like that, healthcare. But could a Christian increase their income solely for wants?
I think it's hard. I've struggled with this. Maybe you can help me with the therapy. Tell
me about your childhood.
I looked at both of you. No, I think so. I think we have. I think we have a. There's a prudence with money because like we have to like you have to have money to like last your life.
Saving for retirement.
We don't have pensions anymore. Like we have retirement savings, but like if you just do your 401k, like even if you max it out, like it'll be a significant amount of money, but it's still probably like
may not be enough,
to maintain your standard of living. And maybe that's what is a standard of living, but
right.
Put that as like let's say you're living a modest standard of living. It still is like it'll be tight in retirement depending on when you retire. And like, well, how long should you work? Should you work till you're 70, 75? Like how far do you have to? So there's always this question like, well, how much do I need, not want,
right? Need
to like retire at a reasonable age, and then donate
fair.
My time back to other causes, right? Because that's the balance. Like the idea is that you don't just retire and sit on the couch. Like you retire and then you give your time back.
For many people in Fairfield County, the desire is to retire at 55 because you can.
You can, and then what do you do at that time? And how much money does that? And okay, it's okay to retire. I mean, I'm not like disparaging anyone who retires at 55. I mean, if I retired at 55, which I mean, I don't know, like I would go and work for the church in some ways. Like I don't know, is what I like to do anyway.
Yeah,
we're here. Good,
I'll hire you.
Great. And so that's the framework by which we're presented as like young professionals. Used to be called yuppies, right? Young and urban professionals.
Right.
But like that's that's what we've been handed. Like here.
And Catholic school is no small expense. So it's like $20,000 a year per kid times, 12, 13, however many years.
Yeah, it's
throw
like
in preschool.
That's a lot of money.
College, now what is it, $75,000 a year or so?
If you feel God calling you to do Catholic school, I mean,
right,
some families might homeschool.
But
if you live in Darien, the public schools are so good.
Yeah, but they're hard.
But like there's this woke sort of ideology that, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like you just, like Catholic school may be the only choice for you, and so you have to spend that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone is meant to be a homeschooling mom either.
No,
So
that's true. That's
It was
true.
interesting. I was talking on that point with schools. Like, I would say that I went to Catholic school for 10 years. I went to public high school. We didn't have a Catholic high school in my town, but we went through 8th grade. And, it was really, I mean, this is like the 90s. It was what, $3,000 a year, which was probably, it would be more
Yeah.
now, inflation adjusted. But
Yeah.
even then, it wasn't like impossible, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of diocesan Catholic schools are still less expensive than more of the private ones.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cardinal Kung is $10,000 a year.
And that's relatively
for high
inexpensive,
school, which is extraordinary.
Because like a local
inexpensive.
private school is $40,000 to $50,000 a
Right.
year,
Right. Like say go to college.
Yeah. And so, but I'm probably a big component. I would say the public schools, yeah, you can move to Darien and get amazing like blue ribbon, like presidential blue ribbon schools. But I was talking to one of my analysts grew up in Darien. He's like a recent hire, relatively. We hired him in 22, and he grew up in Darien. And I was like, he loved to play soccer, like he played soccer through middle school. And he's like, I said, you play soccer for Darien High? Were you part of the Blue Wave? And he's like, no way. He says, I was like, in order to get on the team, JV team, like all those kids that got on the Darien soccer team all had personal coaches.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a different world.
It's a different world. He's like,
like,
I ran cross country because that's what I could do, And it's like, wow, it's so competitive. So that's
competitive.
a whole other.
Yeah, and
that's a whole other.
And that's
like, I don't know if that's
really
good either.
Quite harmful to the psychological well-being of the kids.
Now he ended up okay, right?
Definitely.
But it was it's like it's rough if you're like not
that's the thing,
if you're like good but not the tippity top.
When you live in a community that prizes wealth as much as places like Darien and Greenwich, right?
Mm.
I think even if you don't want to buy into it, you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
Because everyone else around you is doing it, and
especially once you have kids, like
yeah,
you don't want them to be ostracized for not having the special
Right.
coach, not having the Nike gear, and the
yeah. I'll throw Greenwich a bone though. Like Greenwich is way more diverse than like Darien or New
Mhm.
Canaan. I mean, Greenwich has housing projects.
becoming more and more. Yeah.
It has housing projects all the way up through, the richest people in Connecticut, like Stevie Cohen, who owns the Mets, and Ray Dalio, who is the wealthiest guy in Greenwich. And and you also have housing projects. And Stanford's
Yep.
Stanford's not as wide as that, but it also has housing projects
yeah.
and then like very wealthy people. So
Definitely.
and then there's some towns that are very insulated.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other world.
New Canaan.
Darien.
Yeah.
Others.
I've always been haunted by a quote from Tolstoy,
Yeah.
who said, "I'm a participant in a crime if I have superfluous food and another person has none."
Mm.
I've always been haunted. I don't know. Do you agree with that quote?
Yeah, I think that there's a degree of truth there.
So when I remember just being kind of outraged at it when I was down at St. Mary's in Stamford.
Mhm.
It was one of the poorest. It still is one of the poorest parishes in the diocese, and they struggle. It's an inner city parish with an all Hispanic congregation, wonderful people, but didn't make a dime. And I would sometimes go on walks down to the next parish over, which is in Chapin, which is a very bougie part of Stamford, right on the water. And the parish is Our Lady Star of the Sea, which like has waterfront access. It's really nice. And I remember just walking down there and being like, this is not okay. Like the fact that they have so much money that they don't even know what to do with.
And here it's a tiny building and versus like a giant
tiny building.
Yeah,
and like literally like our church is leaking, like the roof is caving in because we can't afford to replace it. And I'm like, the issue is not the gap between rich and poor. The issue is within the hearts of the rich, I think, who have extra money, so much money they don't even know what to do with it.
Right.
And are not willing to give it away. And I think Christians have an obligation. I think if we have things that we are doing that we want, maybe tithing is not enough.
Yeah.
Maybe more is required.
I think that like we're not Catholics aren't Puritans. Like we understand that we can like enjoy pleasures. Right?
Yes.
Like we can drink, we can have nice food. Like
Sure.
we're not, we can enjoy like the gifts that we have, but it has to be matched with generosity.
Right.
Right. So if you're like, I like good food. I buy good olive oil and I buy good cheese, but like I wouldn't buy those things if it meant that I wouldn't be able to like, do a weekly offering at mass or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So there's like that has to be matched, or more.
Yeah, but that's a hard balance to strike, right? Because I think a lot of times the conveniences and the pleasures that we take for granted are built on the backs of those who have not, right? I mean, the fact that we could go to a grocery store and pick fresh fruit in the middle of February is in large part because we have undocumented migrants over in California who are picking these fruits and getting paid less than minimum wage and living in horrific conditions. And, I don't think we realize just how much that you're rolling your eyes at.
There's a lot. That's
it's
probably a little bit broad generalization.
Oversimplification, absolutely, without a doubt.
There's a lot of factors that go into that, especially since the February fruit's probably coming from like South America. But anyway.
But for example, I was with a very dear friend who's a big soccer fan, and over Christmas, he was telling me we were talking about the World Cup, which is coming to Saudi Arabia in 2034, and Saudi Arabia has a terrible human rights abuses, and he was talking about when it came to Dubai a few years ago. They had to literally build a new city for this and new stadiums. And he said that hundreds of thousands of people, slaves, died to build these things because they had to build it really, really fast. So there's no safety. There's no, OSHA
heat
over there, and the heat and dry, and it's horrible conditions.
The outdoor air conditioned stadiums, it's like super efficient too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing when it's built, but like whose backs is it built on, right? And it's just like I don't think when one person becomes wealthier, and I'm not a communist, please don't take me as a communist, but when one when one community becomes wealthier and wealthier, like are we as Christians looking out for those who are not as wealthy?
Well, you should be,
and it shouldn't be a government forcing us to do that, right?
Yeah. I think in the modern, I don't know, maybe you disagree. Sorry to hog the
No,
conversation, but I would say that in this day and age, especially in the United States, like I was like, another struggle is like we need wealthy Catholics, right? We need people to be able to, when one of the Catholic schools needs a new boiler and it's going to cost $100,000, we actually have people that can just literally write a check and be like, here you go.
We do need that, absolutely.
And there's or a couple, like a few families that can write $30,000 checks and just be like, here you go.
And then how do you become that type of family without expecting to be fawned over? Here's what I mean. In my 4 years of being a pastor, I've never once looked at the donations.
By person.
Yeah, I have no idea.
The revenue.
I know the revenue. Yeah, I've seen the profit and loss statements, but
right.
but I've never once looked at who gave what. I have no idea, and I don't ever want to look at it. I think at some point I have to because I have to start a capital campaign. But
do some pastors go down the list and?
Yeah, absolutely, and because they'll pander to those who are wealthy, and kind of if you don't give much, then you're not worth much, And I see that in the Catholic Church. I see that in any organization, right? You'll do anything. You'll bend over backwards for your biggest donors.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just it's a mindset, right? Like you are, as God may have given you these amazing intellectual abilities and a great job, but it's like you're a steward of, you're not really the owner of anything. You're not the owner of yourself either, like our lives are meant to serve the Lord. So we're stewards of these gifts and we have to use them, to Paul's point, to be generous in terms of our offering. I think a lot of our culture today is just like everyone wants to keep up with their neighbors, so there's it's just starting with thinking about little choices each day, right? You don't necessarily have to go on that super expensive vacation. Kids need to learn how to be bored. Kids need to learn how to they don't get everything they want immediately. But yeah, I mean, I don't, you can also, it has to do, we have to kind of look at our own hearts, because you can be a poor person and attached to money too. You don't have to be wealthy, so to speak. It's the detachment from, if God, he gives and he takes away. If he takes away, then that you can still continue and be joyful in that, knowing that, God is providing. And ultimately, we're all, whether you're rich or you're poor, we're dependent on God for everything that we have.
So practically, how do you do that? How do you, especially in Fairfield County, how do you have objective wealth without being attached?
So I'll give an example from my own life to start. I would say that my relationship with money when I made way less, when I was first out of college, was, I can say this in hindsight. So just hindsight's 2020. But I would say now, looking back, it was way worse than it is now. I was very miserly because I wasn't making a lot of money and living in New York City.
Yeah.
And so every penny would be saved. Was not generous at all, And obviously I didn't know that my future would be
as secure
bright.
as it is.
You don't know. So there's a bit of uncertainty there. So I don't want to give myself be too hard on myself. But I was very miserly, very cheap. I would be made fun of. I don't get made fun of for being cheap anymore. right?
That's
I
good.
try to be very generous.
So you'd go out for drinks with friends and be like, water, please.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Like I would stress out, like, should I get 1 slice of pizza or 2 slices of pizza? Not on like health stuff, but like, because it's like $3 versus $6.
Yeah.
I like it. And now looking back,
Okay,
I'm
that's
like,
a little bit.
it
little bit
doesn't,
tightwad,
it didn't
yeah.
matter at all. Right. And so I was like very miserly. So a very poor relationship with money. And it took like 5 years, 6 years for me to like loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like I wasn't enjoying the gifts that God had given me, and I wasn't being generous. And like both of those things probably had to change a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and now I try to be. I wouldn't say I'm like good at it now. Like I try to continually like be more generous
and like
I'm
push
probably,
yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? Like because
Yeah.
you learn to be generous by giving, but then also seeing that like I didn't die by doing this, and actually God like restores everything 100-fold. Like
Right.
he has shown me that too, of like, well, do I do this? And then it's like, whoa, you know, I do this and it's you know, could be, and it's actually more meritorious, I think, if you struggle with that as well. But
Well, yeah.
you know, you can be attached to whether or not you're rich or you're poor. I think a lot of us, you know, like we're worried. It comes down to a lack of trust in God. We're worried about our future. We're worried about like, am I going to have, you know, stuff to, it can be good concerns about like, am I going to be able to provide for my family, especially in Fairfield County where
Yeah.
everything is so expensive, and you do have to be prudent. But
Yeah.
I think there are costs that you can, you know, ways that you can cut out spending. Like, do you need to buy all of those clothes? Like, do you have to have 5 coats? Do you have to, you know, it's little things every day that can kind of get you to where you need to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, Mother Teresa said, give until it hurts. And I think that's important. Give until you make, there's a real sacrifice involved. Maybe that sacrifice is, you know, not get the Ferrari, instead get the Mazda.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. I mean, all with prudence, though, because if you're like, you know, if Paul is going to be future father and husband, like he does need to provide for his family and his wife and his children and their futures and everything too. So that all has to be, it's not like just you're married and you go sell your house and like, you know, okay, kids, we're going to go live on the street. That's not being wise.
But one of the best things you can give your kids, one of the best gifts you can give your kids is to, you know, to not make them worldly.
Oh yeah,
You know,
simple.
and not make them live in poverty, but like for example, there's a family that I know who must be a multi-million family, maybe you know, in the tens of millions, and they drive a beat up old minivan, and the kids have no idea that they're super wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only know because they're big donors to a Catholic organization I'm a part of, and but it was great. I mean, that's a great gift that they've given to their kids.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I think
like,
that's awesome too, because the more that you have, I feel like the more that you become unhappy. I find that when I go to fancier things, it's like it's just like the simple things of being with family, enjoying these you know, these experiences, these nice views and all that stuff. Like stuff doesn't get you the happiness that you think you're gonna have.
that's certainly true.
And there is a beauty to simplicity of children and having them like, okay, just use your imagination instead of like having all these toys that you just continue to like you know, throw to the side and become just clutter in the house.
Right. I mean, when it comes right down to it, right, all we need is a roof over our head, sufficient food on the table, and being surrounded by people we love. That's what satisfies us.
Yeah, exactly. So all of us can kind of like look to simplify our lives and like live according to that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So in the last couple minutes, though, with riches often comes fame, and
We are very famous in the greater Fairfield County Catholic radio scene. Just thought I'd mention that. So we are famous.
I'll tell you, Joe, our co-host Joe, was telling me that a priest came up to him in Philadelphia and said, "Oh, aren't you that guy on the podcast?"
Ha!
So
there you go. It wasn't one of our priests.
No,
I assume.
it wasn't.
Okay,
it was actually a priest by the name of Father Dennis Gill, down in Philadelphia.
Not related.
We're not related. No.
Okay. Wow.
But yeah, so for me, I've never been drawn to money, but I've always noticed my temptation is towards fame.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever felt that desire to be famous.
Not at all. I pity the people who are famous.
Really?
I'm dead serious.
Do you really? Yeah,
I would
me
never
too.
like. I think of it like Taylor Swift, and I'm like, it must be so miserable to be her.
Oh
like,
yeah, it's got to be.
Like
I mean,
you
you
have
see the mental
constantly,
health
you're
issues.
stalked. You're like, you can't go anywhere without people. Just like we can just go for a run and just be left to our own.
Yeah.
Anonymity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it's not great. I just think of like all the mental health issues with famous people. I think Robin Williams. He made so many people laugh.
Yeah.
For so many decades and decades. You know, made so many, and then he commits suicide.
Yeah.
It's like it's Pagliacci, right? It's the sad clown. Very famous. People love him. they're preparing to make Mrs. Doubtfire 2.
Are they
right?
really?
Well,
Come
not
on.
anymore.
Oh, they can AI that.
And yeah, but he was, he could make everyone else laugh, but not himself. He's extremely famous. Couldn't go anywhere without security, and like,
Yeah,
it's
it is
not-
isolating, I'm sure,
it's very
to be
isolating, yeah.
famous.
So do you want to be famous? Like, do you want to be like the next Father Mike Schmidt?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore.
Okay, but you did.
But yes,
Like-
definitely did, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
a real struggle because, and reflecting on it, I thought that fame equaled love.
Mm.
When people know your name and they're praising you for your accomplishments, I thought that was like
Yeah.
that was a validation of my existence.
There's a rational fear of the point at which in the future your name will never be uttered again,
Yes, and especially
or
as
you won't be thought of again,
especially as somebody who doesn't have any descendants.
yeah.
I don't have a legacy to live on. So in a sense, even in my prayer, I kind of sometimes ponder, what is my legacy?
And that's why we name children after our ancestors. That's a way of actually remembering them into the future.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Like, we have family names in my family. Some of them I'm not a big fan of. But but those names were passed down generation to generation such that then you could remember
Yeah,
those people that have come before you, because otherwise they're going to be forgotten.
right.
Like, there's plenty of,
Well, it's very significant that one of the gifts that God gave Abraham was his name would be a blessing.
Yeah.
Because you think about the amount of people that have ever lived. This is over 100 billion people who've ever walked the face of the earth.
Right.
How many of those names are household names?
Oh, that's crazy. That means like 10% of the world's population has ever lived is living right now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay,
It's
go on,
kinda
keep on.
crazy.
Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, you think how many of those are household names? Maybe 200, 250, 300. Shakespeare, Aristotle.
Yeah.
And Abraham gets one. So that's kind of like
Jesus.
obviously Jesus, right? I thought that one was a dead giveaway, but
Yeah.
So this idea of like fame, of wanting one's name to be out there, and
I think it's something that, it's probably part of the fall that we have that maybe inclination. We don't want to be, we are attached to it's an attachment to the world,
yes, very much
Right?
so. Mm-hmm.
because we should be attached to like heaven and Jesus and being with Jesus.
That's good
Well,
insight.
maybe it's
But
a
instead-
misplaced desire too, because
Yeah,
he
right.
wants to do great things. You want to do great things for
Right.
God, right?
Yeah, but then sometimes our motivations, right, are kind of mixed.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is it for God or is it for me?
Yeah. And you want what you do to be impactful. And if the more
Right.
impactful it is, the more you remember. There's a reason why we know Aristotle and Shakespeare and Newton. Like, these guys made
They made an impact.
a
Yeah.
huge impact.
Yeah, they did something really significant in human history and changed the world, really.
Yeah.
And nobody wants their life to be insignificant where you don't change the world.
Yeah.
Right.
But your life is significant, and like you have impacted a ton of people, probably people you don't even know.
Well, it is
Yeah,
with-
you
with
are.
all
You
of our-
are.
with
You
all
are.
of-
You
all of our lives
are
are.
the most famous of the three of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, no, I'm actually not kidding.
That's probably true, but probably not saying all that much.
Yeah. But that comes from you're well known in the Stanford, Greenwich, area, but that's because of all this stuff, like your commitments that you make as a priest, that you like.
Well, you're right. I mean,
you're
as a priest, you're a public person.
yeah.
So, and that's
Yeah.
and there is kind of that flip side that you were saying that you can go for a run in a park and no one will know who you are.
Yeah.
I go for a run in the park and I get stopped 5 times. Oh, hi, Father. I'm like, who are you again?
Yeah. So that's why
Yeah.
your desire for fame maybe has been tempered over the years. I think
That's part of it too. Yeah, it's just appreciating the joys of just a quiet, humble
right.
Yeah.
existence.
I can't imagine if you're at a conference and you're at the hotel and if Father Mike Schmitz wants to he's like a workout freak, right? And he just wants to go to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning and just go work out. Like, imagine what that's like.
Yep.
Like, how many guys and gals, probably more gals, are gonna come up to him when he's in his t-shirt and shorts, like just trying to run
Are you
on a
Father Mike
treadmill.
Schmitz? Oh my gosh, can I get your autograph? Right.
Yeah. It's like, you want to lift weights with me? He's like, no, I just want to run on a treadmill and listen to my podcast.
He's got to repeat that so many times per day.
Right.
You
He
know?
probably doesn't even do it. He
Yeah.
just does,
Which is why I have a great compassion for a lot of times famous people are seen as rude or uncaring, but I have a great compassion for them because of that invasion of privacy that they so often don't get to enjoy.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't think it's anything to be envied.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sounds like there can be some serious spiritual dangers too to fame.
Yeah.
One of them is of course pride
Right.
more than anything. Thinking
I think it's dangerous in this day and age how quickly one can become famous.
yeah.
Right. Through TikTok and all this nonsense. But
Well,
also, what's even more damaging, how quickly they become unfamous.
That's
or
yeah.
infamous.
Or infamous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's true.
make one mistake and all of a sudden you're infamous.
Yeah.
But-
And that's like
but
that ego, that drive, if you have that like crazy increase in the ego and then immediate crash,
You got
we're
to
not
turn.
built. Humans aren't built like.
No, you got to turn to
we're-
something to
we're-
get that
right.
the high
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're not built for that. Like I don't know.
I can't tell you how many young people I've met that are like, yeah, I want to be an influencer when I grow up.
He's like, no, you don't.
Like, wait, you want to be famous for being famous?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like, show me a talent or a gift that you have that you can share with the world. But no, I just
Right.
want to be famous for opening boxes and eating things online, like or whatever. Whatever, like the unboxing trend
Right,
on
right,
TikTok.
right.
You're like, what? Why am I watching someone else open their Christmas gift?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not good. And then like you feel like your worth comes from this affirmation or these people liking you, whereas
Yeah.
like obviously the Catholic and Christian story is different. That like you have innate dignity, and so it's very dangerous. I mean, it's the same on a smaller scale. Social media.
Yeah, which I think is significant in the Book of Revelation. Jesus talks about how the victor will receive a new name known to him alone. Which I always thought that was very intriguing. He gives a lot of different things. The first 3 chapters to if you're victorious, you'll get this and that and this. Sit and reign in the kingdom. But the new name to me alone. It's like so something that's kind of like special secret shared between you and God, and that's all the fame you need. Like if you're written on the palm of God's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thought.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us in this episode of Restless. So do not pursue riches and fame as such, simply for their own benefit, but only if you have been given them, use them well and use them wisely for the glory of God and the salvation of souls, not tying up our worth in either of them, but seeking our worth in God alone. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time to Restless.